Welcome. My name is Jeremy O'Connell, and I am the programmer behind the CYA utility, the full name being Cover Your Assets. Now, you may be wondering what this utility does and why it was created, and that is the purpose of this video. If you just want to jump right into installing and using the tool, go ahead to the next video. Still, the reason, what is that 7-second classic elevator pitch that most of us know really well, and perhaps you know of it? Well, CYA for short, again, Cover Your Assets, was developed to quickly take a snapshot or back up your main Linux or Unix system and allow you to easily restore it using open source utilities. And that is the key. Now, you may be saying to yourself, utilities already exist to back up Linux. And that's true. Of course, they're out there. And you may say to yourself, well, there's also already developed applications such as ZFS or ButterFS, file system level tools that allow you to create snapshots and not really back up your system, because if the hard drives die, you need additional copies, but at least allow you to create some level of protection. That's true too. So you might be thinking to yourself, then why was CYA created? Well, let's go over those points that I raised. First, let's address the file system, because you may have again thought to yourself about Butter or ZFS, ButterFS. Now, if you're not already familiar, those file systems really, ZFS is a really good file system, and I do run ZFS in certain applications, and I personally can't think highly enough of ZFS. It's a very good, well, it just does everything really well. And then that's the point of this recording, is obviously not to go over ZFS. So why not just use ZFS? Well, here's the issue with that. ZFS doesn't work on a lot of applications. It has a narrow, limited scope. And if you're on Linux, and that was what this tool was primarily written for, was Linux, but it works on any NIC system. I mean, it'll work on FreeBSD, it'll work on OpenBSD, potentially maybe Mac, never tried it, Apple OS, Mac OS, never tried it. Because the underlying tools that you need are Bash and rsync. Rsync is doing the backup. Now, I raised another point here. Well, I could just use rsync. Very true, but let me address that. First, let's go back to the ZFS question. It's just not available on a lot of systems. And even though you can put it on Linux, it still doesn't work. It's more of a hassle at the time of this recording to put it on the root Linux install. And it just is not highly available. And so you might say, well, what about ButterFS? Well, that has its issues too. I wanted a tool that would work on any file system, that it did not matter. It had to be able to work on extension 2, 3, 4, XFS, even ZFS. There's times that this tool would work well in a ZFS environment. You can still snapshot it. ButterFS, RizaFS, UFS, because there might be applications where you have a system still running FreeBSD, but you need to choose UFS for some reason. I don't know, but there's just applications. So I wanted to have this tool work on as many file systems and not be dependent. And that is a problem, bringing in another topic where there are a lot of backup tools for Linux, but they're specific. There's GUIs or something that works just for extension 4, or just for Ubuntu, or just for Mint. And this tool works for any Linux distribution, again, because it's Bash based, running rsync under the hood. So it'll again will work on any flavor of Linux, any NICs, and as I said, perhaps even the Mac OS. I have not tried it, but if you have one and want to try this utility, by all means. So this tool had to, again, it had to be open OS, not specific on a specific distro or even NICs. This tool will work on Solaris, for example, as well. So that was number one. It had to also work on any file system, primarily I developed it with extension 4 in mind, but any file system. So it had to be OS agnostic, file system agnostic, easy to use, open source so that you can view the code, see what the application is doing, so it's not encoded in some binary form where you don't know what it's doing. You can see the code, make changes to it. It's distributed under the BSD3 license. And it had to use open source tools. I did not want, or open tools at least, tools that were well known and well vetted. I didn't want some strange requirement. And so, as I said, under the hood, it's just running rsync commands behind the scenes, as well as making directories and so forth for the restore points. But again, as I said, you can see what the code is doing. I don't know of any tool that meets all those. That again is not specific on a specific Linux distro or Nix distro. That does not matter what the file system is. That is completely open source, that you can see everything going on with the tool is doing, and also have the ability to be built on open tools. And in addition to all that, the tool stores all the files it creates in an open format. It doesn't. I thought about compressing it. I thought about using like tar and then gzipping it or something like that. But at the end of the day, I want you to be able to get to your files quickly. And let's face it, most computer systems now have plenty of space. So you can. This tool, I should add, is only backing up your actual operating system. So it's a lot like Windows. Oh, I know. It's a lot like Microsoft System Restore. If you're familiar with that, or if you're not, what System Restore would allow you to do on Windows, or does, is it takes snapshots. And then if something goes wrong, you can roll it back to a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, 3 months ago, assuming you had the space to store the snapshots. You could roll your system back to, say, like 3 weeks ago before a problem occurred, and get your computer state to that time. However, the files that you created, the actual like word processor files and your pictures and anything you downloaded as far as into your personal download directory would still remain. So it only affected the actual system itself. This is what this tool is doing. It is not touching your custom user data. It is only affecting the OS itself. Directories like bin and USR and etc and var, things like that. And yes, you do have the ability to add in your own custom directories if you so wanted to. But again, the tool is not really designed to back up your personal data. It's a system rollback. And so that's where even ZFS can work. You could still have this and then roll it back, because maybe sometimes you only want to restore certain files. So what advantages are there to this? Where would you use this? Well, you would take snapshots. The system will roll your snapshots. The way it works is it has two methods. It has what I call a sort of like an auto method, or standard method, if you will, and then it has the manual method. In the standard method or auto method, when you run the system, it will put the backup of your system in a folder called, or directory called 1. When you run it a second time, it goes into a directory called 2, a third time into directory called 3. Then when you run it for a fourth time, it goes back to 1, then 2, then 3, then goes back to 1, 2, 3, and it will overwrite any information there. Now, because it uses rsync, it will only transfer the files that change. So the first time will be your biggest time through each directory. Then once you start going back and just updating it, it'll only move over, rsync will only move over the files that have changed. So that is the standard method. Then there's what I call a manual method, or keep, and that's where it will actually, you create the profile name, and then it'll just stay there indefinitely until you tell it to either override it, or you actually just keep it there as long as you want. I mean, maybe you do that right after you install your Linux distribution, for example, and you're going to make a, say, install profile, and then it'll be listed there. So the tool helps you through all this. It also helps you through recovery. We'll get into all this later in future videos. I'm not going to go over all that right now. This is just explaining it. So this tool has the advantage of, if an update goes wrong, you run update on something and it doesn't apply right, and you're like, oh no, now it doesn't go right. Or I've had this happen where not too often, but I'll go remove a package, and you just sit there and cringe as you see it deleting the X server. You see X11, the packages were marked for removal, and you're like, oh no, my X server's gone. Now your system won't start. So if you had a snapshot, you could roll it back and then work on a different way to either upgrade your system, check out what solutions were available, or how you would remove the package that caused a problem. So those are two scenarios. Updating a driver, maybe update the video driver from NVIDIA, it doesn't go quite right. Or you, again, are removing something. Also, another situation that is you can get into is you make a config change and you're like, uh-oh, I don't remember what it was. I did this change like 3 weeks ago. My system's sort of unstable. Or you maybe even rolled out, you say put in the open source NVIDIA drivers and they're not working for you. You could roll back to prior to that as long as you took a snapshot and had that. So it gives you that freedom. Intruders, if someone gets into your system and makes changes and you're not sure, you could roll those back. Now, there still could be some files that are sitting around that are outside certain directories that the system backs up. But however, at least if you roll it back, it's going to change it's going to roll back all your boot environments. If you're on system D, all your unit files, cron scripts, things like that. So then at least that won't be running. At least the root won't be running. It won't roll back your custom cron, but at least the system cron. So at least then there may be some legacy or basically orphan code, but it won't be executed. So that's something else that it's good to use this system for. And like I said, even making config changes yourself. Maybe you just want to try something. And also, if a hard drive dies and you were backing this up to another media, you could very quickly get your install back up and running in no time, because again, it's very, very easy to actually get that back up. And as I said earlier, there is a recovery system built into it. You can do it manually, and that's the advantage. Because all the files are stored non-tarred, non-compressed, or uncompressed, you don't have to untar something or uncompress it to see it. So if you know you made a mistake on a file, just go back to a profile, grab that file, and then you can just either rsync it or just CP it or whatever you want to do back into your live system, and you're back up and running, and you don't again have to go through some kind of strange odd interface. It's just right there. I mean, you can use your preferred Linux or Nix file browser, like I like Kaja or Dolphin or Thunar or whatever, or you can just do it from the command line, which is probably better in my opinion, but it's up to you. So that is what CYA, Cover Your Assets, is doing. And I think once you start using this system, you're going to find it, how did you live without it? And yes, you can script this, you can have it auto backing up. And if you're going through the 1, 2, 3 I was talking about, what rolls back to 1, it's going to do that whenever the 4th time comes about, which could be a month, it could be never, or you could schedule it to run once a week. So that means on week 1 you get 1, on week 2 you get 2, on week 3 you get 3, then on week 4 it goes back to 1. But if you run it, say, once a month, then it's only going to, obviously it'll take 4 months to go back to the first time. It's really up to you on how you want to schedule it. I would say, honestly, probably once a week is more than enough, maybe even once a month. I'd say once a week is really good, honestly. And if you're about to do some major upgrade, or you're going to change out, for example, as I mentioned, you're going to go from the proprietary NVIDIA drivers to the open source NVIDIA drivers, then you might want to do a manual. I would just do a manual backup profile just to keep that there just in case. But I mean, you could roll your system back to 6 months ago if you had the backup profile. I mean, how awesome is that? I mean, you can literally reset your Linux system. Then you'll need to apply any updates that have occurred since then, unless the updates were the problem. But still, this gives you some cover. It gives you some it really helps you and gives you a safety net that was not there. That, again, does not matter on the underlying OS, really, if it's Linux, BSD, some kind of BSD, Solaris, whatever. And it doesn't matter on what your file system that you're running. It could be, again, like I said, any extension or RISA or UFS, or it just doesn't matter. And so I think once you get really familiar with this tool, you're going to deploy it on servers, you're going to deploy it on desktops, and you're going to find that it's just something that where was this tool your whole life? Well, luckily you have it now. So that's what CYA is doing and what it's about. And now in the next video, we're going to start the installation process. So I look forward to seeing you in that video, as I said, where we begin actually working with the installation process of CYA. Thank you. See you in the next video.